today we're going to be looking at my wife's Volkswagen Touareg 2014 model. Problem is when we select reverse, the reverse camera doesn't come on and we lose the functionality of the reversing sensors. I'll show you what indications we're getting inside the cockpit of the car. Okay, here we are, so ignition on, start her up. So select reverse and nothing, and we get the flash to say that there's a fault with the reversing and the audible beep. So I'll investigate that a bit further. Okay, so I've opened VCDS, so I'm going to select the control module. Go on to Park Steer Assist, which is number 10. And see if there's any fault codes stored. Okay, into fault codes. And there we go. So we've got supply voltage for parking aid sensors too low. So this is possibly one of two things. The main cable supplying power to all the sensors, either at the front or at the rear, so it'll be two separate cables, or it may be power to one sensor only. Now the ideal will be that it's the cable going to all four front sensors or all four rear. The reason I say that is to test each sensor individually may possibly be a bumper off job, front and rear, to find the culprit. So my first thing will be to find the main harness cable connection that leads to all four sensors. There'll be one supplying the front, one supplying the rear. Once I've located them, I'll show you where they are. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to check is the supply voltage from the control module. This will potentially rule out the problem with the actual control module. So it should be around 5 volts. So I'll go into the advanced measuring values, and then I'll scroll down and select voltage, and I'm looking for about 5 volts. So supply voltage there for park assist, which is showing good 4.9 volts. So that's potentially a good indication that the control module is supplying the correct voltage. If it's way under 5 volts or nowhere near close to 5 volts, then my attention would be drawn to the control module. However, in this case it's not, so I'm going to be looking at sensors only, which is a good thing. Okay, so all the sensors are removable without taking the bumper off. For these ones, there's a plastic tab inside holding the whole sensor on. So all I've done was put my hand up, put a bit of pressure on the sensor and push the clips up and down, top and bottom. Then that pushed the sensor out. You can feed the sensor out from the bottom and then disconnect it. Now it is handy that I do have from my Audi the same sensor, which I know my system works fine. So I've took a sensor from my Audi and it's exactly the same sensor. So all I've done was disconnected the existing sensor on the Touareg, put in my sensor, cleared the fault code on VCDS, read the code again to see if the fault still existed. Now I've done that with each individual sensor, the 4 on the front, and it didn't clear the fault code. So therefore I can connect all these back up and then move to the rear, and hopefully I can remove the rear plugs without taking the, or rear sensors without taking the bumper off. For the center 2 sensors, and because I've took the whole casing out, I'll be able to show you what I mean with these tabs to push up and down. So there's the locating tabs, which actually the sensor pushes into. So that's the same as what's on them. but that's a fixed piece of plastic. However, with these ones, so I'll just clip this sensor in now. So to remove it, you're just pushing up on them tabs, yeah, which is the same in them, and then simply relocate this back into its fitting points and then push these in. And then that's that sensor back in. So that's for the center ones. Remove the whole plastic and then remove the sensor. For the outer ones, the plastic's fixed, but you can put your hand underneath, push up on the tabs whilst putting a little bit of pressure on the sensor, and that'll pop the sensor out. To put it back in on that one, just make sure I've closed that locking tab there. Try and do this one-handed. Might go out of focus a little bit. Yeah, so I've located the sensor back in there, and then I just need to simply push it back in, and that's that one clipped in. Okay, for the rear sensors, slightly more awkward. You're going to be using one hand. Grow your fingernails, because you're going to need them. The sensor's located quite far up on the bumper, however you can access it through the exhaust. Well, not literally through the exhaust. So if you go underneath the car, and I'll see if I can focus in on where the sensor is. Okay, so that's the sensor there. Yeah. Yeah, put my hand in front of the flash there. But that is, in fact, yeah, there. You can see the two tabs, top and bottom. So again, the same technique as the fronts. Just put a bit of pressure on. You can do this. You don't have to be under the car to do this, but it doesn't matter. Get your hand up there. And undo on the tabs and push the sensor out. Then you're basically using one hand then to push back on the grey tab and push down on the clip and release the sensor. And then again, swap out the sensor for a good sensor if you do have one, and then do the same with VCDS. Yeah, clear the fault codes, reread the fault code. If the fault exists, you need to move on to the next one. So I've tested that sensor and changed it, and again it didn't clear the fault code, so I'm now working on to this one to see if I can get access to that. So for the center 2 sensors, you cannot get access to them. Even with my little hands, I cannot get access to them sensors. The crash bar sits right in the direction of these, so you've just got no space to unclip them. Even if you could unclip them, you wouldn't be able to push them out of the recess. So the bumper will have to come off to replace or check them 2 sensors. So what I done was check the other easiest one, which is the far left, in the hope that that would clear the fault code. That would have been 6 sensors checked and only 2 left to do. I'm not so lucky. So it's now down to either these 2 sensors, one is defective, or the fault does not lie with the sensors. But it's always the best thing to check, because as we can see, it's relatively easy apart from these last 2. Now, because I've checked 6 sensors of the 8, I'm now possibly, before I go into removing the bumper to check these last 2, I'm going to investigate the control module and just check the cables on the control module before I then dive into taking the bumper off. But in either case, whether it's a sensor you need to replace on these particular models, or you need to check them, at least you can check 6 out of the 8, and I've showed you how to do that and remove them without actually taking the bumper off.